Hi there, my name is Matt Henlon. I'm a longtime software engineer who's worked on a number of platforms and in a variety of environments. I'm here to help make you feel at home on the Mac. Coming to a new platform can be irritating because you might have trouble finding things you'd be able to do easily on your other platforms. So I'm going to show you some of the most common tools and workflows developers use every day on the Mac to be incredibly productive. I'll show you a few key settings I always use whenever I start working on a new laptop and what it looks like to get work done on a Mac. The first thing I do whenever I land on a new Mac is set up my mouse and keyboard settings. So I'll go to the Settings app. You can find that down in the dock by default here, or if you go to the upper left corner of your screen, you'll find it under the Apple menu. We'll talk about a few of those menus as we go. But if I open up the system settings, first thing I'm going to do is go and turn on secondary click on my mouse. So I'm going to go down to the bottom. There's a mouse option here. And this is where I'm going to turn on secondary click. So when I click the right side, it'll behave like a right click on a mouse. There are a few other settings I can change here as well. I've got a magic mouse. If you've got your own Logitech mouse coming from another platform, you can also use those, usually just fine. But there are a few things like gestures that I can enable on the Magic Mouse that let me use it a little bit differently than your traditional drag around mouse. Now that I've enabled that, I can go to the file system and I can right click on things and access additional menus and additional options on files that I'm going to work with. I can also do things like right click on files and show their package contents. So some files are going to be directories, and I can see the structure underneath. This has got a few Swift files in it because it's an app. So by turning on that right click, I have a quick and easy way to get to my additional menu. So that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I'm a developer. I don't like my hands to leave the keys too often. So I go to the keyboard settings. And this is where I'm going to enable keyboard navigation. This will let me use the tab key to move around different controls on the screen. So I can interact with the different elements without my hands needing to leave the keyboard. When I land on something, I can use the spacebar to change, for example, the keyboard brightness in low light. And it'll also let me select buttons when a dialog pops up and everything. Also in here, we can open up keyboard shortcuts. And we can see a whole bunch of system-wide shortcuts that we can take advantage of. I'll go into a few of these, quite a few of these, over the next little while and in the next few videos. But there are lots of shortcuts we can take advantage of, and we'll go over those specifically in a video dedicated to shortcuts. Now, if that's not enough keyboard access for you, we can tweak our keyboard settings behavior in the accessibility settings. So I would go up here to accessibility. And there are a few different sections in here. There's vision, there's hearing, there's motor, and that's where we're going to find the keyboard. In here, we can turn on full keyboard access. Now, this is going to let me jump not just from control to control, things that I can interact with, but also to all the different elements on the screen. This is really helpful if I want to read this text aloud. So I typically don't turn that on. That's a little bit overkill for me. Enable full keyboard access in the keyboard settings is usually enough for me. There's one last tweak that I make before I leave the settings when I get to any new Mac, and that's the trackpad. So if I'm working with a laptop like this is, I'll go in here and I'll either familiarize myself or change a few of these settings. So this will change the way the right click behaves. I can have it just trigger when I click in the bottom right corner of the trackpad. I like the two finger approach. We can also change the way scrolling works. So when I push up, instead of it scrolling a certain way, I can scroll the other way. I can change the direction in case it's not behaving the way you expect it to behave. And I can also take a look at some of the other gestures I have available to me. Like swiping left or right with 3 fingers will bring me to other full screen apps and other desktops. And we can also have easy access if we do a 3-finger swipe up to this thing called Mission Control. That shows me all the windows that I have open right now and not hidden. On my desktop, I can look at my other full screen app for TextMate. And when I select one, that'll bring it foremost. This is more useful when, as you can see here with the app switcher, I can see a list of all the apps that I have running right now. At the moment, they're hidden. This is something I do a lot just to clean up my workspace a little bit. But if I did have all of these open and I use Mission Control, that's going to make space for everything to show up on the screen, so I can kind of have a 30,000 foot overview of what's going on. So really helpful for just giving me a quick look at the system. Now, I do tend to try to tidy things up a little bit. So if I don't want to select any of these, I'll just tap in between windows. I can actually hide everything as well by going up here to System Settings and saying Hide Others. We'll hide every other app but the foremost one. So those are the settings that I set up straight out of the box to make sure that I'm productive right away. Okay, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is like input and how we get things into our documents and our editors and all the rest in macOS. When we're working in a file, we can enable all sorts of different keyboard layouts. So if you have your own external keyboard, Bluetooth or wired, you can plug that into macOS and it should work pretty much out of the box. So we can jump up back again to settings. For example, in here, I've just got my normal keyboard. If I go up to System Settings, I can go to keyboards again. I can go to input sources. And you can see I've got an Irish keyboard, and sometimes I'll have an external US keyboard as well that I'll attach. And I can get my keyboard, whichever one I'm using, to behave like either one by going up to this in the menu, because I have Show Input Menu in menu bar selected. I'll have a list of the different keyboards. I'll also be able to access the emoji and symbols keyboard. In fact, I'm going to go back to TextEdit, create a new document. I can bring up my emoji and symbols keyboard, and this is where I can either drag them in, or I can show that again and double click. And it's a bit annoying that it goes away every time I insert one. So another quick way to get there is Command Control Space will bring up the emoji picker in case you want to litter your code or text with emojis. The other thing we can do is we can show a keyboard viewer. So if you're trying to figure out where you get which symbols on the keyboard, you'll see a representation of your keyboard here. If I hold down the Option key, some things will change. When they're highlighted in orange, it means that when I tap that key, then it's going to change what comes up next. So I could get accents over the E's, I's, O's. If I hold down the Control key, I'll see other behaviors. Shift will show me what it's going to look like when I use Shift. Shift, Alt, same thing. So if you're ever looking for a character, this is a good place to go, is the keyboard viewer will give you a view of what'll get typed when you actually hit the key and what special characters you might be able to type out. If you can't find those, it's always useful to just go up to the emoji and symbols viewer and you'll be good to go. Now, the other thing you might be missing when you get here is you might be missing the delete key. So say we're here, and if we hit the delete key on the keyboard, the one that's just over my return key, it's going to delete the line behind the cursor. But imagine I want to delete in front of the cursor and there's no dedicated delete key. If I hold down the function key and delete, that will delete forward. So you get that old behavior back. Now, if you have an extended keyboard, sometimes those will come with the delete key as well. But that's just handy, especially if you're traveling with a MacBook. Using the function delete will do a really good job of just deleting forward. So that's a quick look at some of the input stuff that might be a little bit different than you're used to. The app lifecycle, you might be familiar, is a little bit different as well. So for each app, for example, this is TextEdit. The menu isn't attached to my window, it's up top. For the foremost one, I can go up here to see all the other windows that are open for TextEdit. And if I were to go and close each one of these windows, I'm going to delete that one, I don't need my emoji text, and close this one. Now I don't have any more windows open, but TextEdit is still running. And one way to tell how it's still running is if I hit Command Tab, I get my app switcher up, which is should be pretty familiar. I can see it there in the list. In fact, I can use my mouse to mouse over these. I don't have to just keep hitting Tab to iterate through each one of them. The way to finish a program is to go up to Edit and say Quit TextEdit. And then it's actually gone out of my running apps. We'll talk about shortcuts and Command Q and all the rest of the stuff that we can use in a future video. But in addition to the app switcher, and we'll talk about the Finder in the next video, we can access a lot of our apps from the dock down below. Now, the dock has lots of different options. We can customize that lots of different ways. We have 3 sections in the dock. We have our pinned apps here. And some of them are going to have slightly different behaviors when we click on their icon. We have our running or recent apps section, and then we have our document section as well. And by default, we have a downloads folder. So if we download anything, that'll show up here in this folder, and then it'll expand out in a little stack here. We have Launchpad. Now, I don't use Launchpad a lot. So one thing I might do is actually just click and drag this off. If that doesn't work, we can right click on it or 2-finger click on my trackpad and say remove from dock. Now there's a number of these that I don't use all that often. So for example, FaceTime, I'm not going to use on my machine. I'm going to remove this from the dock. I'll remove my contacts from the dock. Freeform, I like it, but I'm not going to use it that often. I'm going to remove that from the dock. Reminders, TV, we're going to take that off as well. Keynote, so I can customize this so that it's just the apps that I care about. If, for example, I find myself using Visual Studio Code a lot, I can actually drag that either over here, or, for example, with TextMate, I can say Options, Keep in dock, so that even when I quit TextMate, it'll still remain in the dock. It's just a handy way to get to your pretty frequently used apps. And so I try to keep it pretty tidy. When we mouse over some of these, the bars here, we're able to click and drag to make it a bit bigger. If we've limited the number of apps in there, we can also make it a lot smaller. If we right click, we can change certain behaviors of the dock. We can turn hiding on so that it's not there all the time. If that's the case, we would just go down to the bottom, and by going near the bottom or whatever edge it's pinned to, the dock will show up. Speaking of whichever edge it's pinned to, we can also say change the position on the screen over to the left, for example, if we want to use that real estate in here for other work. I'll leave it on the bottom for now. We'll also see that, for example, if I minimize this window by hitting the yellow button, it'll also show up down in the dock. And then lastly, we have our trash there. So any files we've deleted, they just get moved to the trash. When we know that we're definitely done with them, we can say empty. And we'll look at some of these dialogues that pop up and how to change them and how to get rid of them in a lot of cases. The last thing I want to look at is the scroll bar behavior. So if I open up TextEdit again, I'm going to open up a few of my recent items here. Ground Fox, and actually maybe Heart of Darkness would be a better one. One thing I want to do is I want to have my scroll bar behavior change. I want to jump to where the mouse is. So if I look at it now, this is a fairly large document. The scroll bar only shows up when I start scrolling down. And when I mouse over it, it gets a little larger so I can hit it. And if I click in the scroll bar, it'll just page down. It won't jump to where my mouse is, but I can change that behavior. So if I'm not sure, if I'm looking at this and I'm like, I know I want to change how my scroll bars behave, I'm not sure where that is, I can type in the search bar for my settings, and it'll give me a few options. So if you can't find whatever setting it is you're looking to try to tweak, type in a few things in the search bar, that might help you. This one looks likely scroll bar behavior, so we'll tap on that. We can change when the scroll bars show up. We can say, all right, well, we'll have them show always. So now in my text edit window, I can see them already. And then I can change the behavior to jump to the spot that's clicked. So if I'm used to saying, oh, I want to get down to the bottom quick, when I tap, it'll scroll all the way down instead of jumping from page to page. So at this stage, I'll leave mine this way. I actually like having those hidden and showing up only when I need them. So now this is my machine pretty much set up and ready for me to go. I'm happy with all the different settings I've got between the mouse click and the keyboard access. Those are the key for me. And I'm ready to get some work done. But that's the end for now. So the one other thing that we usually do as we're working with a Mac is instead of shutting everything down, we can go choose shutdown. More often than not, we choose sleep. It just sort of suspends everything rather than shuts everything all the way down. This means we have instant access to our files when I open that laptop cover back up or if I wake the machine back up. So I can be productive pretty much right away. So that's a quick tour of your Mac. That's given you a few ideas of how to tweak certain settings to make you a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more productive as a developer working on the Mac. In the next topics, I'm going to show you how to get around the file system with Finder and Mission Control. Talk about a bunch of the time-saving shortcuts that any self-respecting developer wants to take full advantage of. Highlight some of the ways you can make the Mac feel like home. Dive into the command line and go over some of the safety and security issues Macs have and how to work with them to get your work done. We'll see you in the next video.